Talk to me about home Opie. Are you excited? Do you get jitters?
You know what? I do.
Good.
Like, it's just good. Like, that just means you're alive. And I think that, like,
Yes.
I will always get jitters. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's
Of
like,
course.
Have you ever seen a betrayal so profound and well-planned that the entire fan base screams at their screens, asking whether their favorite team's top staff has gone insane? Wild coaching changes, acrimonious rivalries, and startling off-season drama are commonplace in the sports world. However, the recent events in the WNBA have gone beyond anything anyone could have predicted. It was expected to be a significant improvement for a struggling team that had finally found success when the Indiana Fever abruptly fired their head coach in favor of an experienced veteran. Rather, it ignited a match in a gasoline-soaked room. The same mastermind who organized one of the most violent, physical, and contentious playoff beatdowns against her just months ago is now stepping in to mentor the greatest generational talent the sport has ever seen. Social media is overflowing with claims of treason, conspiracy, and plain front office incompetence from enraged fans. The players know exactly what is happening behind closed doors, and someone finally had the audacity to say it aloud. However, the true fire isn't simply coming from irate people blogging in all caps on the internet. Sophie Cunningham of the Phoenix Mercury, who is well known for her unvarnished honesty and refusal to participate in the league's publicity games, has revealed the worst-kept secret in women's basketball. Everything we believe to be true about this significant coaching turnover is altered by what she revealed about the toxic jealousy, the targeted antagonism, and the obvious sabotage directed at the league's golden rookie. It also creates the conditions for a locker room civil war. But you have to go back to a rookie season that seemed more like a physical and psychological survival test than a conventional basketball campaign in order to fully comprehend the scope of this exposure and the reasons why fans are threatening to boycott. It was brutally clear that the league's veterans were not going to throw out the red carpet as soon as Caitlin Clark took the court, bringing with her unprecedented millions of viewers, sold-out venues, and charter planes. They intended to put her to the test, shatter her, and demonstrate that professional dominance does not follow from college acclaim. And the Connecticut Sun, under the leadership of their talented but brutally antagonistic head coach, Stephanie White, perfectly embodied this hostile, militant welcome committee. The defensive strategies used against the rookie during her tenure were more than just competitive and tight. They were oppressive, unrelenting, and occasionally extremely dangerous. Night after night, fans watched in complete terror as the young star was targeted, shoved, and beaten in ways that went well beyond the bounds of conventional basketball physicality. It was like witnessing a well-planned hit operation passed off as a defensive tactic. With her arms folded, White watched from the sidelines as her players carried out a strategy that appeared to be intended to cause the greatest amount of annoyance and physical harm to a 22-year-old who was merely attempting to play the game. The intense animosity of these games became the season's defining story, dividing supporters into angry factions who saw it as obvious, unrestrained targeting and purists who said it was simply tough defense. The playoff series, which will live on in the memory of enraged fans as the pinnacle of league-approved sabotage, was the ultimate culmination of this animosity. Highly contentious no-calls, constant trash language, and a terrifying moment when Sun defender DeJohnny Carrington struck the youngster in the eye with a nasty, uncalled blow were all features of the eagerly awaited contest. The head coach remained on the sidelines throughout, downplaying the blatant targeting that everyone could see in slow motion, justifying her players' aggression, and sidestepping questions from the media. Seemed like a well-planned attempt to totally undermine the youngster's self-confidence. A planned sabotage meant to keep the veteran's brittle ego from being eclipsed by a rookie. The youngster was sent packing, pummeling, injured, and eliminated from championship contention as the Sun proceeded, demonstrating the strategy's undeniable short-term success. Stephanie White and the Connecticut Sun emerged as the fans' biggest enemies. They stood for the old resentful establishment that tried to drive the future out of the building rather than adjust to the new basketball era. Millions of new viewers were left with a really bad taste in their mouths after watching the series because they could not comprehend why a league would let its most valuable asset be handled like a tackling dummy. However, the story was far from over since an insider whistleblower was poised to completely destroy the league's tacit rule of ignoring this obvious abuse. Enter a veteran who has never shied away from speaking her absolute truth, upsetting others, or questioning authority, regardless of the repercussions. In a world where prepared media training rules, Sophie Cunningham is not just a terrific athlete but also a huge lightning rod for keeping things incredibly real. Cunningham saw right through the enormous cloud of smoke and mirrors, while other players cautiously avoided the media, making highly sanitized PR remarks about how brutal the sport is and how rookies must earn their stripes. She was able to see the unmistakable undercurrent of bitter hatred that was contaminating locker rooms and significantly influencing defensive tactics across. She exposed how certain veterans and coaching staffs were going out of their way to make a cruel example out of the new lady, calling out the petty jealousy that had forcefully overtaken the league in a sequence of incredibly honest moments. She didn't hold back in the slightest, making it very evident that the rookie was providing a league that had been begging for expansion for more than 20 years with unheard-of revenue, huge brand deals, international exposure, and long-overdue chartered aircraft. The players and coaches who were actively attempting to undermine the rookie should instantly swallow their pride, check their egos at the door, and acknowledge the enormous financial blessing that was in front of them, according to Cunningham's shocking comments. Her remarks completely verified everything the enraged fans had been yelling from the stands and on social media for months, cutting like a razor-sharp knife across the industry. Without having to list every single offender, she effectively verified that the vicious, almost murderous strategies used by clubs like the Connecticut Sun were not just typical playoff defense. They stemmed from a deep-seated animosity that was destroying the league from the inside out. They were intensely personal and incredibly petty. The story was entirely changed by Cunningham's revelation. It was a confirmed truth supported by a well-respected veteran who was completely tired of seeing her classmates behave like envious high school students. It was no longer simply insane fan conspiracies. She depicted a league that was totally split between players who wanted to improve the game and those who wanted to take it back to its dark past in order to preserve their own wholly made-up sense of supremacy. The pretense that Stephanie White and her defensive enforcers were merely playing hard-nosed basketball was totally demolished by this, revealing it to be a well-planned, envious operation. And everyone would be shocked by what transpired next, which transformed a simmering, highly contentious off-season into a full-fledged conflagration of indignation and perplexity. The Indiana Fever Management Office made an extremely stunning choice that rocked the whole world of sports just weeks after the team's heartbreaking playoff demise. They prepared to unveil their new hire after firing Christy Sides, the coach who had uncomfortably led the squad through a very hectic and stressful season. Supporters were pleading for a visionary, an offensive prodigy who could both shield the youngster from the wolves and help her realize her entire potential. Rather, the announcement came as a complete bombshell. It wasn't an impartial newcomer. It wasn't a highly regarded college development specialist. The playoff sabotage against their franchise player had just been brutally orchestrated by the same woman. The Indiana Fever officially announced Stephanie White as their new head coach. You could cut through the situation's pure irony with a chainsaw. The ultimate mastermind behind the animosity, the coach who smirked as her former teammates poked, prodded, and bruised the league's most valuable asset, was now being given the actual keys to her future. Even Hollywood screenwriters would have rejected the story twist because it was so utterly implausible. The fan response was immediate, loud, and completely explosive. Instantly, social media timelines became virtual battlegrounds as ardent supporters demanded unwavering responses from the Fever's general manager and front office. How could they aggressively betray their star player in such a way? How could they have a generational talent follow commands directly from a lady who had just finished a demanding season attempting to methodically ruin her mental calm and physical rhythm on the court? High-definition videos of the forceful hard fouls, the eye poke, and the haughty smirks from the Suns bench were quickly circulated by fans, who immediately brought up the nasty playoff series, demanding to know how any of this made sense for a team attempting to establish a dynasty of championships. The term sabotage began to gain popularity throughout the world as enraged fans vehemently argued that this was a major inside job by a league front office that fundamentally still did not want to see its newest star succeed on her own terms. People started to wonder if the league was putting undue pressure on the Fever's management to curb the rookie's enormous influence by binding her to an extremely strict, traditional coach who would severely restrict her freedom. The spectators' intense rage was no longer limited to winning or losing basketball games. It was about defending a player who they believed was being relentlessly pursued by the very organization she was currently preventing from going bankrupt. However, the widespread public indignation was merely the outward manifestation of a far more profound and intricate psychological issue that was developing in the background. As you sit silently in the Indiana locker room, waiting for the season to begin, you must examine the fierce psychological warfare in great detail. The relationship between this new head coach and her star franchise player will be very, even oppressively, tight when training camp formally begins. Can a player really trust a leader who, only a few months ago, aggressively urged defenders to violently cross the line in order to stop her? When the vocal Phoenix guard took the microphone, she was alerting everyone to the extremely poisonous surroundings. Sophie Cunningham was essentially foreseeing this catastrophic collision of civilizations when she bravely revealed the underlying jealousy and the obstinate inability of the old guard to adjust to the new reality. The new coach is haughtily entering a building where millions of highly guarded followers see her as the complete adversary. She must somehow magically persuade her young, severely damaged star that they are now on the same side. On both ends of the court, it necessitates a huge, nearly impossible swallowing of pride. Reputable sports analysts and critics are exceedingly doubtful that this strange union can succeed. They firmly believe the proverb that a tiger never changes its stripes, and that a generational talent that already fully understands how to win and dominate would unavoidably conflict with the deeply embedded senior coaching attitude, which conceitedly holds that highly hyped rookies must be mercilessly broken down before they can be rebuilt. The overwhelming, indisputable worry is that this contentious hiring is a well-planned, elaborately camouflaged leash around the neck of a player who was becoming far too powerful, far too quickly, rather than a daring move toward a title. The fast-paced, deep-shooting electric style that initially made Caitlin Clark a worldwide sensation will be totally neutralized if Stephanie White tries to implement the exact same gritty, slow, defensively taxing system she ran in Connecticut. Supporters fear that White will make Clark stop shooting from the logo, insist that she play a conventional, incredibly dull half-court basketball style, and basically ruin her career from the inside out in order to demonstrate the continued superiority of traditional coaching techniques. Fever supporters' intense anger toward the front office is fueled by their intense dread of tactical sabotage, which keeps them up at night. The whole horrifying situation is extremely fascinating and volatile because of this deeply concealed objective. This current catastrophe feels very different from the league's past struggles with how to protect the fragile egos of its aging veterans while also strongly marketing its bright new stars. It feels incredibly, uncomfortably intimate. A very unsettling picture of a very divided league has been portrayed by the enormous discoveries courageously made by players who were not scared to speak up. Divided exactly in the middle between the extremely profitable new revolution and the resentful old school. The new Heat coach, an absolute grinder who fervently believes in gaining every last bit of respect by blood, sweat, and great physical superiority, is the epitome of that obstinate old school mentality. Her defense tactics in Connecticut were a veritable master lesson in physical intimidation and extreme psychological strain. However, it is an entirely other and extremely risky game to try to apply the same tremendous pressure from the sidelines as a purportedly encouraging mentor to a rookie player whose ridiculously large fan following aggressively analyses every little micro-expression and sideline interaction. The internet will utterly and brutally erupt if the young star suffers early in the new season, misses a few shots, or if it appears that the newly established offensive scheme prevents her from making her famous, crowd-erupting long threes. The loud allegations of inside sabotage will instantly resurface tenfold and take over the daily sports news cycle. Every timeout, every brief benching for rest, and every harsh coaching comment captured on a hot microphone will be immediately scrutinized, recorded, and thoroughly examined as unmistakable evidence that the coach is secretly attempting to destroy her own franchise player in order to appease the league's resentful, envious veterans. The pressure is entirely unheard of. A head coach has never faced such severe, oppressive scrutiny from day one in the history of contemporary sports. Stephanie White is more than just a basketball coach. She is negotiating a very dangerous minefield where a single incorrect glance or poor play call might set off a massive public outcry that could ruin her entire career. She won't receive a huge grace period from the fans. They won't have patience. They anticipate complete offensive modernization, instant supremacy, and complete star protection. The stadium itself may completely rebel if White doesn't make significant progress on any of those fronts. The intense, quite covert rumors that are currently going around about how the rest of the league is secretly responding to this enormous terrain are even more outrageous. Changing the shift. Rival teams are reportedly observing this strange Indiana experiment with keen, almost malevolent anticipation, according to deep whisper campaigns from insiders. Fervently hoping that the team will soon implode dramatically from the inside out due to the extreme internal friction. They are fully aware that an unmitigated catastrophe will result if the new coach obstinately attempts to impose her strict, extremely aggressive style on a player who desperately relies on complete freedom, creativity, and great pace. When Cunningham revealed the league's extremely toxic characteristics, this is precisely the horrifying situation that was brutally revealed. The intense jealousy that was called out is for total, unquestionable control rather than merely media attention, sneaker sales, or magazine covers. By placing one of the most obstinate, defensive-minded coaches in charge of the most explosive, creative offensive rookie in sports history, the league has unintentionally set the stage for the biggest power struggle the sport has ever seen. The bitter veterans and the deeply established coaches desperately want to control the narrative of the sport. They want to dictate exactly how the game is played, who is allowed to be successful, and who gets the ultimate glory. Will the seasoned coach truly change, swallow her own enormous pride, and allow her young star to soar, or will she brutally impose the same constrictive, harsh, traditional mindset that greatly characterized her highly contentious tenure in Connecticut? If she sadly decides on the latter, the enraged